Welcome to the 9-Day Fitness Podcast. Today I'm going to be talking about how food links to your mental health. Before I jump straight into it, I'm just a little disclaimer. All the research isn't mine. I'm going to say where it's coming from, and also I don't have any certification or anything like that in nutrition. However, I do know a little bit about it, being in fitness and whatnot. Let's just jump straight into it. The importance of good nutritional intake at an early age is explored in multiple studies, including a systematic review in 2014, which found that a poor diet with high levels of saturated fat, refined carbs, and processed food is linked to poorer mental health in children and adolescents. One 2014 study found high levels of well-being were reported by individuals who ate more fruit and vegetables. Diets high in vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, beans, cereals, grains, fish, and unsaturated fats such as olive oil, supplemented with fish oil, led to a reduction in depression among participants, which was sustained 6 months after the intervention. So this is coming from CBS, the news station in America. The gut-brain connection. So mood-regulating chemicals, inflammation, oxidative stress, gene expression, cell damage, and immunity. So I'm going to talk about that later on in the podcast and how each of those words link to your mental health. So mood-regulating chemicals in food, for example. So blood sugar can create changes in mood. For example, a high amount of glucose can heighten our mood in the short term, but crash in the long term. Which is why there are times like sugar crash. However, having slower glucose release from foods like oats, legumes, and greens can stabilize our mood more as blood sugar levels stabilize. So that's basically, like I said there, sugar crash. So say if you've eaten loads of chocolate, you can get that high amount of energy really, really quickly because your body's going to break that down very, very fast. So you're going to feel great for say half an hour. And then after that, your energy level is going to come crashing down because the body has no more of that energy to release. So therefore, your mood's going to come right down. So if you ever eaten loads of chocolate and notice that, afterwards you just don't feel that great, that's probably why. Both ghrelin and leptin are linked to mood and food intake. Levels of leptin, the appetite suppressor, are lower when you're thin and higher when you're fat. So basically, leptin basically suppresses your appetite, so it makes you less hungry. And basically, when you're thin, it's actually lower, so it's going to be harder for you to get back that appetite. So say if anyone's struggling with anorexia, for example, it's going to be even harder for you because your appetite just isn't going to be there. So you kind of need to just push through that, really. Where was I? And higher when you're fat. But many obese people have built up a resistance to the appetite suppressing effects of leptin, says obesity expert Mary Dolman, with a PhD from the University of California at San Francisco. Ghrelin, the appetite increaser, is released primarily in the stomach and is thought to signal hunger to the brain. You'd expect the body to increase ghrelin if a person was under-eating and decrease it if he or she is overeating. Just like I said earlier, it's going to be really hard for you to get back to normal. Sure enough, ghrelin levels have been found to increase in children with anorexia and nervosa and decrease in children who are obese. So it's almost like the opposite is happening to what it should be. So you're going to feel less hungry if you're thin, and more hungry if you're obese. So that's from Elaine Maggie, MBH, from Nourish by WebMD. There are several neurotransmitter systems involved in feeding, such as serotonin, dopamine, opioids, and GABA, of which serotonin and dopamine have been the most closely linked to feeding behaviour. Dopamine mediates reward, specifically the wanting or approach behaviours towards a biologically relevant goals, more so than liking or enjoyment aspect. So basically what that means is instead of really enjoying a meal, the chemical's not doing that. The chemical's actually making you really crave and want that meal, and then after, obviously, that chemical's gone, you're just not going to feel fulfilled. So say, for example, for me, sometimes I crave a McDonald's meal, and then I'll get there, I'll eat it, and then I'll be like, oh, that wasn't great. So yeah, that's why you feel like that. Okay, so this is from the US National Library of Medicine. Okay, and this is from the National Institutes of Health. Okay, so overeating can also be considered to be similar to drugs because it reflects an addiction where individuals become physically and psychologically dependent on foods rich in fat and sugar. Reports also show that with an intake of palatable rewarding food, acute stress responses are reduced. Okay, so this reminds me of cigarette smoking and how people smoke more of it and they think, oh yeah, I'm not stressed anymore because I'm smoking. Or are you actually not stressed because the nicotine addiction is now obviously gone because you've just had the nicotine. And so the more and more you smoke, that's why you need more and more nicotine and more you need to smoke more to get rid of that feeling of craving when you crave the cigarette. So the cigarette doesn't actually solve anything or make you less stressed. It's actually making you more stressed and giving you more problems. Okay, so also sugar is also found to be more addictive than drugs, as found in a study on rats. I've seen this all over the place, to be fair. I've seen a lot of films and stuff say the same thing. Obviously I'm not relying on films, but this obviously goes to prove that it's right because it's from a actual study. Okay, so individuals under chronic stress tend to have more visceral fat due to excessive systemic cortisol levels. Okay, so cortisol is a stress hormone, so when people have high levels of it, they tend to stress eat. So release dopamine, which in then turn creates obesity, and obesity is linked to depression. One of the symptoms of high cortisol levels is abdominal fat. So when pot bellies, for example, a lot of people stress eat will then have that pot belly because the fat will go to that specific area. And so yeah. Okay, moving on. Obesity increases incidence of anxiety and mood disorders. From Simon 2006. Stress-induced overeating and obesity is also associated with major depression in humans. Like I said earlier, they're both linked together, very closely linked together. So many obese people will also have depression because, like I said, very closely linked together. Okay, so this is from a TED Talk that I watched. It's from Julia Rutledge. She did a placebo test on people who suffer with ADHD, where she gave some of the candidates a micronutrients tablet and another the placebo drug, and found that people who took the placebo drug gradually got worse. However, the candidates who took the micronutrients pill found that different areas of their mental health issues had improved. She also found that medical drugs only worked in the short term rather than the long term. And gradually the people with micronutrients got better and stayed better. So that if that's another reason for you to increase your micronutrients. Now, micronutrients is actually all the minerals, all the vitamins and stuff like that in your diet. So very dense foods and stuff like that. So say avocados, for example, very good for you. Fruit, veg, all of those kind of things, very mineral dense and micronutrient dense. Sorry. Okay, so poorer physical health and living in poverty or deprived communities have been found to be associated with poorer mental health and well-being. Both these inequality factors have also been shown to have a complex relationship with poor nutrition. So these factors can kind of be changed upon. Obviously, if your lifestyle changes, obviously the food you eat might change. So, for example, a poorer house might not be able to afford some of the more nutrient-dense foods, or maybe not even know about them. I coming from a working class background, some of my friends, for example, some of the foods I eat, they're like, what is that? However, if you go to a middle class background, a lot of them do know about this stuff more. I don't know why, but that just seems to be the case. So yeah, like I said, a lot of the cheaper foods aren't mineral dense, micronutrients dense. So yeah, if you go to the supermarket, you'll see the pizzas are quite cheap. Chips and all that, very, very cheap, but not very dense in nutrition. Okay, so results from a 2010 systematic review found two-way associations between depression and obesity, finding that people who were obese had a 55% increased risk of developing depression over time, whereas people who experienced depression had a 58% increased risk of becoming obese. So, for me personally, I've never been obese. However, when I haven't trained for a long periods of time, I have felt bad because I'm not getting the natural releases of dopamine and all of those kind of stimulating chemicals that your brain releases that makes you feel joy and happiness and those kind of feelings. So yeah, and also when you eat a lot of bad things for duration, you tend to feel quite bad as well. Like I said, with the energy releasing thing as well, you're going to have short-term energy, so in the long run you're going to feel like bad, like crap. Okay, and that's from mentalhealth.org. Moving on. Okay, so this is a article about diabetes. This could be eaten when you're not hungry as a way to relieve feelings of stress, sadness, or even boredom. This can often be a bar of chocolate or an extra piece of cake, but eating in this way can have an impact on your emotional well-being and your diabetes. So this is like stress eating. So like I said, eating lots of chocolate. It's never going to help you. To be fair, when you do comfort eat, might feel good for that half an hour, depending on how much you're eating. However, like I said, in the long run, low energy, and realistically, the problem that you're stressed about is definitely not going to solve that. So yeah. Okay, so choosing foods that release energy slowly will help keep your sugar levels steady and also keep you feeling full for longer. High blood sugar levels can also impact your mood. You may feel irritable, angry, grumpy, or lethargic. So just like I said. Also, for a bit more context on what releases energy slower. So you've got simple carbs and you've got complex carbs. The complex carbs are oats, stuff like that. That basically release energy over time a lot slower. So then, obviously, your mood and energy is more stable. So, for example, Weetabix, when they make you feel good all day. If you've ever seen those adverts, that's what they're talking about. The carbs that they put into Weetabix are going to break down slower, and so therefore make you feel more energetic throughout the day instead of feeling great in the morning and then say in lunchtime you feel a bit down. Okay. Also, for example, coffee, another good example. If you don't eat much chocolate, you'll feel great for an hour, and then after that, your mood will just gradually decline because that energy, like I said, isn't there anymore. Okay, so that article applies to people without diabetes as well. Obviously, it's just that specific article was about diabetes. Okay, so if you find yourself eating food such as chocolate as a way to relieve your emotions, you should try to replace it with something else. How about watching your favourite TV program or visiting your friends? So, for example, when I'm stressed, I like to exercise. Maybe I'm angry, help me relieve that anger so I'm more level-headed after. and also release the chemicals that I mentioned earlier. And replacing behaviors, basically. When you feel stressed, instead of instantaneously go into that activity that you think will relieve it, like chocolate or the bad habits, blah blah blah. Go for a walk, practice mindfulness, and etc. I might do another podcast separate to that, just talking about those kind of activities and stuff, and give you some research about that as well. Okay, so that's from www.diabetes.org, Guide to Diabetes, Emotions and Feelings about Food and Diabetes. Okay, so this is from another TED Ed talk. So omega-3 and 6, both are linked to preventing degenerative brain conditions. Having omega-3 and 6 in your diet is crucial to maintaining cell membrane, while having good fat like omega is good for the brain. Having bad fat long term may compromise your brain health. Protein and amino acids, the building blocks to growth and development, control how we feel and behave. Amino acids contain the precursors, a compound that participates in a chemical reaction that produces another compound. That's what a precursor is. For neurotransmitters, chemical transmitters, which affect our mood, attentiveness, and sleep. Food has complex compounds which release serotonin, dopamine, and neuropinephrine. Apologies if I mess up the last one. But like I said, those are the chemicals that I mentioned before. This means by having a balanced diet, you can have a range of combinations of these chemicals so that your mood doesn't swing one way. Micronutrients, like I said before, such as antioxidants, sorry about that, help the brain fight off free radicals, which are the waste produced when the body uses oxygen, which can damage cells, ultimately meaning that your brain will be able to work for a longer period of time. So without the free radicals, without all the damage to your brain, obviously it'll be more sustainable. Without vitamins like B6, B12, and folic acid, our brains will be more vulnerable to brain disease and mental decline. Minerals such as iron, copper, zinc, and sodium are fundamental to brain health and early cognitive development. Diets high in refined sugars, for example, are harmful to the brain. In addition to worsening your body's regulation of insulin, they also promote inflammation and oxidative stress. Inflammation is then inflammatory cells. Inflammation is when inflammatory cells are in your brain, where obviously it's in a confined space and eventually will damage the brain cells. So, obviously, say this is your brain. The inflammatory cells are there, and if they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, obviously the brain can't just expand like that. So it's going to get hurt. Okay, so that was from Eva Cell Hub. She went to Harvard Medical School. Okay, and that's it for this podcast. Let me know if you'd like any more or anything else. Please subscribe and like, share, leave a comment as well. And also, if you've got any friends that may be struggling with their mental health, give this a shout to them. Maybe if you notice their diet isn't that great, this will hopefully explain a couple of things to them, why they're feeling that way. Also follow all my socials, so Night and Day Fitness on Facebook and Instagram. And hope you had a really good day. And yeah.